One of the things that we've seen has been the Trump MAGA crowd parroting the notion that there was weaponization of the Department of Justice against Mr. Trump, which is obviously a narrative that you would like to deploy if your leader is in fact a criminal, was convicted in certain places, was indicted in others, and had the prosecutive team say, hey, we had a good case here when it was closed down. So faced with all that evidence, obviously the thing you want to say is weaponization, fake news, all the usual denials.
Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is about to put on a masterclass in combating and debunking the MAGA propaganda talking point that Donald Trump has been unfairly and unjustly persecuted by our country's legal system.
The political appointee was told by his career staff that there was no evidence of any crime and they couldn't proceed. Do you recall any time in any of the Trump federal cases where a political appointee was told by the career staff that they had no case?
Senator, I've been doing the job for 10 years, and I can tell you that I have never, ever seen anyone, myself or anyone else, be directed to prosecute or drop a case based on politics.
Yeah.
It just does not. It does not.
And in this case, the woman who was at the head of the office who told the political appointee that he had no case was forced to resign as her penalty for not going forward. Nothing like that ever happened in any of the Trump investigations that I can recall. Do you have any recollection of any career folks being fired for refusing to go forward with a case that had no merit?
Senator, my supervisors have always expected me to do the right thing. I think something that people need to understand about prosecutors is we're unique in the sense that our job is not to win our case, it's to do justice. And so every supervisor I've ever had would demand nothing less than me to do the right thing for justice. And if that means dismissing a case, that's what you would do.
For additional context, Senator Whitehouse is comparing MAGA's persecution claims against Donald Trump to a recent case involving EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin clawing back $20 billion in congressionally appropriated funds from the department's greenhouse gas reduction fund under the typical guise of, quote, investigating waste, fraud, and abuse, and is being conducted by the FBI and DOJ.
The political appointee went forward with a pleading that no career attorney would sign. The only signature on it was the political appointee. Did you recall that ever happening in any of the Trump cases?
In my personal experience, I've never had a situation where I was asked to do something that, except for the Eric Adams case, that was the first time I was asked to sign something that
Unusual to go forward with a pleading where no career attorney will sign for the Department of Justice, correct? Only with a political appointee signature.
Yes, Senator.
Yes, it is. In the Trump cases, I don't recall anyone ever getting shot down, any of the prosecutive team, when they went for an order. And in this case, when the political appointee went for the order and went to the magistrate judge, he got shut down. When I was a U.S. attorney, if we got shot down for an order by one of our district judges, that would have been like, stop, figure out what went wrong. This is a never event. Let's figure this out so it doesn't happen. Do you recall that any of the Trump orders were ever shot down by a judge, or every time that prosecution team went to a court for an order, they were successful?
Senator, not sure about which order. I would say that it would be if I went to a court and was shot down for probable cause, that's happened, but you try to avoid that.
Yeah, you try very hard to avoid it. And after that's happened, do you ever go to another district to try to shop the same case where the judge had found that there was no basis to proceed?
It's never come up in my career, Senator. If I did, I would certainly tell the next judge that the last one found no probable cause, and that probably would not bode well.
Whitehouse is doing a brilliant job here because to anyone who legitimately cares about the rule of law and putting reason before partisan loyalty, it's becoming clearer and clearer that the Trump administration is willing to go to any lengths to achieve their policy goals and ambitions, playing a dangerous game of chicken with judges and attorneys and effectively daring our country's legal system to challenge their authority, justified or not.
I don't believe in the Trump cases any prosecutor ever made public statements outside of the pleadings about the culpability or wrong of the subject of the investigation. And yet in this case, both the political appointee and the agency chief who was engaged made public derogatory comments, false allegations, it seems, of fraud, defamatory per se. What are the concerns of the Department of Justice when political appointees make statements about the potential guilt or culpability of an uncharged person?
Senators, you're aware we conduct grand jury investigations in secret for a reason, because if we can't substantiate the case against someone, we close it without the public ever knowing, and that's to protect the American people.
And in this matter, the last thing that happened was that the agency had been going forward with its own case under the president's executive order, shifted to the fraud argument to try to improve its argument before the federal judge, not a magistrate judge, the U.S. District Court judge. And the U.S. District Court judge said, guys, there's no evidence here. You've shown me no evidence to support this claim that there's fraud or misconduct here, and yet they continue. And I can pretty well bet that in none of the so-called weaponized Trump cases was there a moment when a federal judge said, there is no evidence here, and yet the department continued it. So I guess the conclusion I draw from this is that there is fake weaponization, which is what you say when you're following somebody who has serious criminal liability, has been indicted, has been convicted, and you want to make all that go away with a narrative about, oh, that's just weaponization. And then you put your people in power, and what happens? The actual weaponization begins. And this counts, by my count, 7 red flags, any one of it which would have called a check to a case in the normal Department of Justice.
So I think one of the last parts of Whitehouse's testimony is really important with the fake weaponization of the DOJ, because this type of thinking, the goal here is to manipulate the American public into falsely believing that Trump is innocent, and all of his legal issues boil down to strictly political differences, when we know that is the furthest thing from the truth. The man has been convicted, okay? He has been convicted. There have been trials. He's been convicted of crimes, okay? And as he points out, the real weaponization comes after that, because you place all of your followers, if you will, into positions of power where they can affect change, where they can drastically hurt people and make the country worse because they're doing your bidding. In this case, Donald Trump's bidding. Days before giving this testimony, Senator Whitehouse gave a more in-depth explanation detailing how Donald Trump's Republican Party appears to be guilty of the same exact so-called weaponization that they accuse the Democrats of subjecting Trump to.
We have heard a lot about weaponization of the justice system from Trump and his allies. That's for 2 reasons. One, it's a handy narrative for Trump and MAGA cronies to paint him as a victim, not a convicted criminal who only dodged proper sentencing and further criminal charges because of sweeping presidential immunity granted by a Supreme Court stacked with right-wing justices he appointed. 2, it's a tactic for would-be autocrats. Accusations signal intentions. You accuse the other side of doing what you're plotting so that when you're caught doing it, you've set it up to look like offsetting penalties. Accusations signal intentions. And sure enough, now there's real weaponization of the justice system unfolding before our eyes. But what we see is real weaponization, not MAGA phony claims of weaponization, part of a political propaganda campaign to excuse the criminality of the dear leader. Here, all these red flags of actual weaponization are flying. Internal warnings that the case had no merit, removing officials for disagreement, proceeding without a career attorney, getting shot down by a magistrate judge, case shopping after the disaster, hunting for FBI agents to harass career civil servants for managing properly congressionally appropriated funding, making derogatory public comments, and all without evidence.
It is so necessary and vital right now to have a judiciary and legal system independent from partisan politics to truly uphold the rule of law. And this is the reason why Republicans have worked so hard to sow distrust of the legal system while stacking courts with partisan hacks that will rule in their favor instead of actually upholding law. See, first they get you to believe that the courts are out to get them. They're out to get the Donald Trump, right? They have no business being there, and they don't really uphold the law. And then they go and do the same thing by putting people on the Supreme Court who are basically going to do whatever Donald Trump wants, right? Not all the time, okay? But a lot of times, they're going to do whatever Donald Trump wants and rule in his favor instead of abiding by what the law says. It is gross. It is repulsive. It is nasty. And it is embarrassing that we have gotten to this point in our country where people voted for it, right? 77 million people. And now we have this. A flat out disgrace. Rebel HQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.